My name is Sam Nicoletti, and I see murders before they happen. A little voice tells me the killer's name and address. And if I stop them, I save a life. If I ignore them, an innocent human dies. What would you do in my situation?
Psychic Sam is a classic boys comic. It's about a guy with a big gun who goes out and solves problems, and he hears voices in his head tell him to kill bad guys. The only trouble is the bad guys haven't done anything yet, but every time he ignores it, someone innocent dies, and it's only a matter of time before the bodies start piling up.
I'm working with a guy named Mark Millar. Mark and I started on Wolverine together, and we got to create Kick-Ass, and we had a brilliant time. It changed our lives. So now we come up with a third collaboration, and it's called Psychic Sam, and I have the legend Klaus Janson working with me, and then the brilliant Bill Crabtree doing the color art. And we are having an all-out blast with this.
The big news is we're also doing a movie of Psychic Sam. There's a guy called Ivan Atkinson who's brilliant. He's Guy Ritchie's producer, and he's produced some of my favourite films from Guy. Wrath of Man, The Gentleman, all these amazing films Guy's been doing over the last few years.
Ivan Atkinson, yeah. I'm excited to be teaming up with Mark Millar and his exciting new project, Psychic Sam. Mark and I have been talking about working together for a number of years, and have found the project that I think brings fascinating characters and action together, reminding me of the films I grew up loving.
This is completely outside of Millar World and Netflix and all the stuff I've been doing for the last 20 years, really.
None of those books will be affected, and all our new titles will still be out there every month. I just carved out a wee holiday for myself and thought about doing something for maybe Marvel or DC again. Then I thought, wouldn't it be great to do some creator-owned with Johnny Romita Jr.?
There's so many great tiers to this, so many great levels to this. We're gonna do a black and white version with a painted cover.
Done in the style of a 1970s Marvel magazine, beautifully packaged in that big magazine-size format.
There's hardcovers, there's t-shirts, there's trading cards, there's stickers.
Spectacular stuff. You can also get written and drawn into the issues, which would be a lot of fun. I have to do justice to all of you.
We're assembling a fantastic team of filmmakers on this production, and we will have some more information for you guys soon.
We just are having so much fun with the character. It's probably as good as it gets, but the fact that it's the third time with Mark, it's a charm.
I think there's something special brewing here, so don't miss it.
Good. That's us. Excellent.
How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you beautifully. Can you understand me okay? More importantly, my accent is a hard one.
No, I got it. I love the accent. Are you kidding me? No, my parents could not speak a word of English when I was born. So
Are they Portuguese or what?
Portuguese, yeah. Yep. So they would speak to me in Portuguese and I would answer them in English. And that's kind of how we both learned, the language.
I've got a pal who's Chinese, and he couldn't speak a word of English when he started school in America. And he said that, literally didn't understand anything anybody was saying around him. It was all American kids. But there was one Dutch kid, and he said that Dutch kid could only speak Dutch and also couldn't speak American, and that's what pulled them together,
Yeah.
And they're still best friends now,
It's the best time to learn because now I cannot learn a new language.
Oh, forget it.
At all. I kind of, and both my kids are mad at me that I didn't teach them Portuguese when they were young enough. Portugal used to not be cool though when I was a kid. Now it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool place, And then of course you can go to Brazil and everything as well, which is great,
Exactly. Yep.
So where are you now? Are you in Texas? Yeah.
I'm in Austin. Yeah. I like to say Austin instead of Texas. It's kind of, a little different. But yeah, I've been out here over 20 years now. I grew up in New York.
Well, I was going to say, because you're interned at Marvel and all that. I mean, you're one of these really rare artists who actually interned at Marvel. A lot of writers did it, but it's actually quite unusual for the artists, isn't it? Artists would maybe be in Neil Adams' studio or something like that, or Rob's studio or something, But it's kind of unusual for an artist to be in-house at Marvel, who went on and had a big career.
Yeah, it was so interesting because strange story. I didn't want to do the internship. I didn't even know about internships. A buddy of mine, we would make our own comics and draw together. And his name was Nelson. He was like, you got to do this internship program, but my grades were so bad that I wouldn't get into any college if I didn't try to get my grades up. Because back then, if you did an internship, you got to pass or fail. So whatever your average was, you kind of maintained that.
Yeah.
And it was bad. So I went and I showed them my stuff, and they took me on as an intern. So, thank you, Nelson. But, it was a lot of just making Xeroxes and scans. And I would hold pages by Alan Davis, Arthur Adams, hey, Art, represent. And I would just, I feel like I learned more in a year there in the bullpen, right? Because I was in the bullpen. Artists were in and out. Mark Texera would be overnight working on Ghost Rider. I would leave, and when I come in, he'd be asleep on the desk. Just wild shit. It got me ready for it. And, they were really nice, and they helped me get my stuff there. And Bob Harris at the time was like, I don't want to tell you this because I don't want you to drop out of school, but when you graduate high school, I'm going to give you one of the X books. And I was like, yeah, okay. And sure enough, it was the Deadpool's first miniseries. But it was a wild time. At first I was doing intern stuff, and then John Romita, actually senior, was like, they must have needed help in the art raiders room, and they were like, get this kid in here. And it would be little things like you'd put the little whiteout strip and correct a little mistake on the costume or something like that. But I did not even want to touch people's original art. I was so scared, but I don't know. They started to trust me. They're like, this kid's not bad, actually. And I would do some Raider work, actually, doing art touch-ups. And then, it took off from there. It was wild.
It's crazy because, that's the kind of stuff you hear about in the 40s, like Gil Kane doing this in Milton Caniff's studio or something like that. It's so weird that you got to do that in the 90s. And to be at Marvel at that really exciting time, because that's before Marvel went on the slide in the 90s, isn't it? You would be there about 1991 or something like that, yeah? Doing your internship. Yeah,
91 till 95 or 98, I think, actually. Yeah,
so, that's an amazing... But in terms of being in-house, that's when the royalties were gigantic, and you had guys like Todd and Rob and everything. It's a real... A bit like that Frank Miller, Walt Simonson time. It was just one of those periods where there was a lot of superstars doing books. It must have been a really great time to be in there working.
It was amazing. I remember when Jim Lee came and he had to finish a cover or something while he was there, and they set him up in a corner somewhere, and I was like, they're like, make sure no one bothers Jim, and I'm like, everybody stay back. And I had no idea I was about to break into the industry. I was just a lifelong comic fan and massive X-Men nerd, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, all those guys, Paul Smith, John Byrne, obviously. I would couldn't believe I was meeting this person. And then, a year later, I was it was maybe a year or two later, it was hey, how would you like to replace Jim on Uncanny X-Men? And it was
That's crazy. It
was very, very weird. And when I think back on it, it seems surreal still to this day.
But, you're nervous, because sometimes you can be too young for performance anxiety, can't you? You're kind of well, of course I can replace Jim Lee in the X-Men, because you're 18, you don't realize that's quite a daunting thing. So were you like that, but you just thought, yeah, cool? Yeah.
I wasn't going to say no. I've always kind of had, imposter syndrome or whatever. I still think, I don't know. Never tell me the odds is how I roll. Cause I just rather not know, if something's difficult or what hardships I'll encounter. I usually figure it out, so yeah, sadly I did get tons of hate mail at that time, because it was still snail mail, right? And then at the end of every month or so, Marvel would gather up all the fan mail and send it to me in boxes and stuff. And there would be 2 or 3 sweet ones I love your style, and then 100 you ruined my favorite comic, you suck, your anime bullshit is terrible, why are Cyclops' eyes so big, where are his nostrils, because I was influenced by anime at the time, and I could not deal with as a kid. I'll be honest, I would just push the mail into piles, and eventually I would toss it, because I was I can't even open this stuff. And then I asked Marvel, please don't send me the mail anymore. I'm not reading it because I didn't know how to like handle that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
funny enough, now looking back, people are like, "Hey, Joe's X-Men were cool," and introduced
Time heals
anime
all
style
wounds.
or whatever. But like back then, it was not welcome. Believe me.
Well, nobody likes change as well, don't they? And you were coming in with a brand new kind of set of influences. There's a bit of Art Adams in there, obviously, but you were one of the first, or that wave of first guys, to be really influenced by Japanese comic book art, weren't you? I mean, Frank Miller, obviously, but in that more overt way that you guys were doing it, you, J. Scott Campbell, and everybody, there was a whole new generation of guys coming in with a new style, and it probably was a bit jarring at first after John Byrne and Jim Lee and so on,
No, it definitely was. And I think back then too, I was just too inexperienced to like really be a good storyteller, I think now, like I enjoy just visual storytelling more than the actual like illustration part of it.
Yeah.
Like I almost would rather do storyboards in a weird way because I love breaking down shots and like planning, like reveals, and like I really love visual storytelling. But back then I was just trying to do cool pinups in every panel. Like, I didn't really know what was going on. So it took me a while, but yeah, and go ahead.
I was going to say, when you're a kid, your mum, when you draw a picture of Batman or something, she's like, "Oh, I like that big picture of Batman." She doesn't care about the 3-panel sequence where you do a really nice piece of storytelling, so you're coming at it young, it's all about pinups when you're that age, isn't it?
Yeah. And, later as I got more into, cinematography and film and anime and just animation in general, just, looking at each panel as like, what they're supposed to be, camera, like basically camera shots and like camera movement, framing, it like changed the way. And I think that's why I was so influenced by anime and manga for a while. I feel like manga had a little more of a cinematic, like film-like storytelling where it was like, John Byrne would be like, action and reaction in the same panel. Hulk hits the guy and you see the guy hit the wall. Bam. Yeah. And anime was a little more like, there's the wind up, there's the hit. And then it's like 3 panels, which seemed inefficient, right, at the time. But I'm like, I just started to see them more like little like movies playing out on the page.
Yeah. That was transformative for me, guys, looking at it that way, like another couple who did that really well, I think, was Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch in The Authority. Like they somehow melded that style with an American style. It wasn't overtly manga or anime, but you could see the DNA in there of that stuff when they broke down storytelling in a new way.
Oh yeah, no, it was fantastic. And hitting, your Ultimate stuff too, Hitch's Ultimate stuff felt very cinematic, it's just very film-like. And I think that's the way that, if I ever got back into comics full-time, I think I would want to really push that and really take my time more on the shot framing and movement and less on like the tons and tons of little noodly details and stuff. So my priorities have changed finally.
It's interesting though, because the Image guys, I always think are fascinating, because that first year of Image was nothing to do with story at all. No offense to the guys, but it was all about the artwork, wasn't it? It was all double page spreads. Nobody remembers any of the stories really, but like it was essentially an art portfolio, wasn't it? Like
it was.
And readers loved it. And in the second year they started hiring expensive writers. And readers were less interested. It was really interesting to me, because, I'm convinced comic book art is 80% of what sells a story, what sells a comic book. But there was something about the rawness of just cool art, wasn't there, that readers went crazy for? And the minute you started getting a little bit more sophisticated, you could see people's eyes glazing over slightly, and they just wanted the cool art again. So don't get too grown up. Don't get too grown up.
No, it's true. I think that honestly, that gave me a little bit of the courage to like, start writing my own stories. Like I would see Todd writing Spawn and I'm like, well, these stories are cool. Like, and most, manga artists like write their own stuff. And I'm like, I can tell a story. It might not have the greatest dialogue or whatever, but I didn't realize how bad it was at first. But again, I would just rather dive in there and figure it out. And, you know, obviously I got a lot more into writing over the years, but back then, you're right. It was just like pinup after pinup. And I don't know, those guys really influenced me a lot. Rob, actually, Liefeld, he gave me a lot of really good advice, like at that crew. He would be like, just, you know, make sure every page has, you don't want to be flipping in the comic store and see nothing and put it back. Every single page should have something on it that grabs your attention. And like, you know, and within that page, there should be a panel that's like more important than the others. Like that stuff has always stuck with me in my mind, because I think I already was trying to do that, but I didn't know why. But it was just like, he just breaks it down like so quick. He's like, when somebody opens this thing, they look at one page, maybe another, and they will buy it because they're going to see something awesome, because every page has to have like this, you know, eye candy or whatever.
Rob's very wise. I think he'd be a great editor-in-chief, I think, in that sense. He understands the market. He understands what kids in particular like. I do an experiment every few years. I haven't done it for a couple of years, where what I do is I get a bunch of comics and I sit them out for the kids. You know, my kids now, but I used to do it with my nephews and nieces. And I'll spread them out and say, what ones do you like? And some of their friends are in as well. And they flip through everything and they say, oh, this is pretty cool, or that's terrible and everything, you know. Every time Rob's their favourite artist. Like Rob's just got something. There's a crazy energy to his stuff. He gets comics, doesn't he? And I think those Image guys, there was a magic to them. Those early guys, wasn't there?
There was. I mean, it was like all of my favorite artists at the time under one roof. It was mind blowing. Sometimes I wish, I was like, man, I missed that by like a couple years. I feel like if I had gotten, you know, into the industry earlier, you know,
16 when you started. If you were any early,
I know, I just should have been born earlier. You know? But no, that was a wild time, and I was such a huge fan of Rob at that time on, you know, and Deadpool specifically from New Mutants. That when they were like, "Hey, we want to give Deadpool his own series," I was like, "What?" Like it was wild. So.
And who was your boss then? Who were you working under at Marvel when you were 16?
The very first thing I did at Marvel that was published was for Marvel Comics Presents, and that was Terry Kavanagh and Mark Powers. And then I want to say Suzanne Gaffney and Bob Harris. You know, eventually I got moved. Oh no, I mean,
when you were an intern, who was your editor you were working with though?
I was just in the bullpen, and I was for everyone, whoever needed anything. Yeah, I was like the bullpen intern, which was kind of a better place for me because I was handling art from every editor, and like every once in a while they would send me to like you know, go buy like fish or whatever for oh my god, what was it? Tom DeFalco's he had like this aquarium. And I'd be like on the subway, like holding these fish, and like, oh my god, I'm so scared. But that was the kind of stuff I was doing. But mostly I was doing stats of the pages, and I would approve comics for the comics code before we sent to the comics code. Sometimes, you know, I'd be going through there and be like, we can't have that word in there. Just little of everything. But yeah, it was a wild time, and then. I became buddies with Mark Powers and Terry Kavanagh, and they were like, you know, Marvel Comics Present, it's like 8 pages.
I remember.
You could do one. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I think it was a North Star story. I did a North Star one and a Mojo one, and one came out before the other, even though I did the North Star one first. And it was so weird, like being inked by someone. Like it was like, I don't know. It was just surreal. I remember the very first time I helped Mark Texera. Like, he's like, "Hey, kid, just ink these panel borders. Like, grab a ruler." And I was just like, "Panel borders? I'm touching his original art." And I was inking the panel borders. And I remember when that issue came out, I went to the store and I was like, my friends were with me. I'm like, this is the issue of Ghost Rider where I did these panel borders. I was just so excited, you know, by literally anything. And then, yeah, again, not knowing like a year later, I would probably like have my own stuff published. So
Crazy. So what were you reading growing up? You know, like 5 years earlier when you were 11, what were you picking up then? So that would be what, 1986? Were you reading Frank Miller, all that kind of stuff?
Frank Miller, yes. Anything Frank Miller, anything. I was very artist focused back then. So anything like Alan Davis, Arthur Adams, George Perez, any of the X-Men guys, Mark Silvestri.
Those of us who grew up in the 80s were so spoiled, weren't we? I mean, when you look at that lineup of guys, like Alan Davis he's a bit like Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, you know, in the sense that every artist knows he's the best, isn't he? You know, that Alan Davis is a master, but I feel fans don't talk about him enough, you know, like he's so brilliant, isn't he?
He definitely had one of the biggest impacts on me.
Yeah.
At that time, like and it's not like a very obvious one, but when I would handle his originals at Marvel, like I was like, can I like make a copy for myself? And they're like, yeah, whatever. And I would like, you know, do what I had to do with the art, but then I would like keep copies to myself. And his originals were so beautiful. Who inked it? It was like Paul Neary.
Paul Neary, I think.
Yeah.
Mark Farmer.
Just every page, every panel was like flawless. You know, the way he did hands and like faces. I was just like, I learned a lot just from like, you know, studying his work in particular. But yeah, I mean, Brett Blevin's originals were crazy. Everyone, it was like the heyday, right? Like every amazing artist was sending pages in. And like, I remember Art Adams would have these little, on the back of the boards would be these like sectioned off, like small, he would do each page really small, just rough layouts on the back, and then like the full page on the front. And like, it was just part of his process to like see everything small, which completely makes sense. And then save time, right, on that part of it, and then blow it up and do the whole thing. There was like so many and Brett Blevins would have sketches all over the back of his originals. So like, the backs were almost as cool as, you know, the pages themselves. So yeah, again, I think if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have fallen in love with it. I mean, I was making my own little comics like for fun, but I didn't really think of it as like a career or a business. And until I was there, and then I was seeing how this stuff happens, and I'm like, you know, if I could just get my stuff a little better, I could probably do this. And then when they were giving me the 8-pagers on Marvel Presents, like I didn't even know if there'd be another one. I would just treated each one like it was the last one I was ever going to do. And, you know, luckily there were some very helpful people. Mark Teixeira, got to shout that guy out. He was always so busy, but he always like I can't even talk about it. He was cool. He helped me a lot. So yeah, it was a good time.
But you know, I always think it's a great training for people that we don't really get anymore, especially because you guys all lived in New York. I guess it was possible. Yeah. But it's a bit like, you know, like in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan, you know, you're sitting with a master who then teaches you how to be better than an apprentice, you know? And it's hard, isn't it, for kids to try and do it from home? You know, if you live on the other side of the world or whatever, it's always great to have a little gang you're with and somebody teaching you.
It is. And like you know, on one hand, you do have access to a lot more stuff now, like online courses and like YouTube videos and tutorials and stuff. So that part's cool. And you can join ArtStation or whatever and like have your stuff visible to the world. Back then, you know, if I wanted, I would go into the Japanese import bookstores and like not be able to read a word of Japanese, but I would buy the cool video game magazines and like, you know, manga that were always sealed. And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be good. But that's how I got them. And like, that's how I found awesome new art, or at the comic store. Right. But now it's like, you know, so that part of it's easier, but you're right. There is like you know, an aspect of just meeting people and learning from actual other professionals, and even, you know, relationships you form do help you. I'm sure that they were like throwing me a bone because they probably liked me. I was like, this guy's always here. He's a hard worker. Let him do a back cover or something. I don't think I would have gotten that from just sending my art to Marvel. Sure. You know what I mean? So I think building those friendships and just, learning from actual people, just like I said, I learned more in like a single year in the bullpen than like my entire life, probably.
Well, it's all of my director friends always say to people, don't go to film school. Actually go and just make the coffee on a set, and you've no money or anything. You don't get paid to do a lot of that stuff. But just hanging around a film set teaches you so much more than somebody's going to teach you in a lecture hall. You see all the relationships and what you have to do and how you deal with people and so on. And friends of mine did it for a year, and then they said it set them up for life. They said it was like going to Harvard or Yale, and I guess that the bullpen is probably the comic equivalent of that, isn't it?
No, totally. And my advice to anyone always, including my daughters, is like, just intern somewhere. If you want to get into a field, intern. Like but a lot of people are like, I'm not going to work somewhere for free, like for pennies. And it's like, even at our, on the video game side, often when we would bring in interns or at our studio, just like very junior people, like we probably hired like 7 or 8 out of 10 of them after. You know what I mean? Like it's if you like prove yourself in that situation, like there's a pretty good chance you're gonna stay on, versus just applying for jobs like randomly. So it depends how bad you want it, but if you are willing to invest a little more time and not make a ton of money right away, I think if you're serious about it, I don't care what field it is, it just, internships, get to know people, like you said, be on set, watch what people are doing, and just figure it out.
One of my friends, I remember he said to me when we were all starting out, he said, I'm not doing an art portfolio. He said, they can pay me to do it if they want to see my art. And I was like, but they won't know what your art's like. They won't pay you unless you actually do some free stuff. And he was like, I don't work for free. And he's never worked, so he's never managed to get a gig.
Yeah, I have a kind of a controversial take on the whole, it's kind of died down now, but a couple of years ago, the whole paid in exposure, like we'll pay you with exposure. Yeah. And it's like, obviously, don't let people take advantage of you. You shouldn't be doing work for someone that's making money where it's not going to work out for you. But I do think exposure is extremely valuable. I myself have done stuff for exposure even after becoming a working professional, just because it's like, it's not an opportunity I want to pass up because it is going to have a lot of heat on it. And, maybe I'm not getting paid. Maybe it's a favor, but it's like still something that I, feel like is important to do. And it's weird seeing these young kids that haven't done anything that are like, I'm not, they're not willing to like just take a chance or just work for free for a minute or, sometimes the reward like comes later, but it's hard. It's a hard one to explain.
A friend of mine wants to write a book. And he said he's not writing the book until he has a deal. And I said, you won't get the deal unless you write the book, So it's like, nobody likes to hear it, but you have to do that first bit for nothing, don't you, to get the work done, to be seen.
Yeah, and in a way, I feel like most of the greats are kind of already doing the job. They're already writing the book and they're already making the art before they ever even approach anyone because they love it, It's like if you're 30 years old and decide to become a musician, suddenly it's not that you can't, but there are kids that have been playing the drums since they're 3 years old and have like 4 albums worth of music by the time they're 16. And it's like, those people were not waiting around for a check or, and kind of like me with comics, I didn't see it as a career. I just wanted to do it.
Yeah. Well, we'd have done it anyway, even if we weren't getting paid. I do it now for free. I give the money to the artist. I don't take a paid rate or anything like that. I just give it to the artist because I want to get as good a possible artist on the book. But I think we were going to do this regardless, I think, weren't we?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm sure the artists appreciate it too.
Oh yeah, they love it. Yeah. So, But so, what kind of kid were you then? Were you like a comic guy? Because you probably when you were a little kid there was maybe Atari games and things, but there wasn't computer games as we understand them now. So were you pretty much a comic guy as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, it was both for me. I probably was. I got the Atari 2600 for Christmas when it first came out, and like that was my obsession for a while. And I always did have a PC in the house, Commodore 64 and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I was gaming on the PC with the the beginnings of the internet and all the like bootleg game downloads and everything. It was fun times. But yeah, I also was reading comics. And I was just like a reclusive kid. Anything I could do in my room by myself, that's what I would do. My mom would always joke that like sending me to my room was not a punishment because it would be like, get out of your room and go outside. That would be worse. Because I was always in there drawing. I would read a lot. I loved choose your own adventure books for some strange reason, and I would like hoard up on those, and I'd be at the library all the time. And yeah, just drawing my own stories, drawing my own creatures. I think I was like maybe 5 or 6. I was really young when I saw Clash of the Titans, with the original Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, love it.
And it just blew my mind because at that point I was into Looney Tunes and like I was trying to draw Bugs Bunny and Fred Flintstone and stuff. And then I saw that and I was like, what the hell? This creature has snakes on her head and like her blood creates scorpions that kill all these guys in the camp. It like that. And I remember The Hobbit, the animated Hobbit, 70s Rankin and Bass Hobbit, like those things, it was just so wild to me. I became really fascinated with like just creatures, specifically like monsters, and like I would buy all the Dungeons and Dragons player guides and like the monster manuals and stuff, and just like soak up all that. I would like read about all the creatures, and I could tell you they're like hit dice and all this stuff. Like I was like a little encyclopedia, even though I was like, probably not even 10 years old. But I was so into just drawing monsters and stuff. And I think that in addition to like, reading comics, I had a cousin and he turned me on to like John Byrne, George Perez, all those guys. I remember he had the Frankenstein, Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein. And he was like, he lived in Massachusetts. So we would drive up there from New York, every few months. And I could not wait to see him because he was the only other person I knew that drew. And in my mind, like he drew very like professional level of like Spider-Man and whatever. He was into comics. And there was one weekend where he showed me George Perez Teen Titans, Arthur Adams Longshot, and Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein. And he was like, we were going page by page in Frankenstein. He's like, look at how like no blade of grass like crosses over another one, and like really going into like all the line work, and like that was the weekend where, and then he also had a comic he was working on, of this like Conan looking guy like diving into water to get the sword and save this damsel and kill monsters and whatever. And I was like, this is what I want to do like forever. Like that was like, it clicked that weekend. It would just like overwhelm me, and I could not stop drawing like after that. So
is that when you realized it was a person who did this? It wasn't, when you're a little kid, you think comics are just made by a machine like Kellogg's cornflakes, But was Bernie Wrightson and Art Adams and those guys the first time you thought, I recognize an art style and I know there's a human being?
Yeah. Yes. After that, I became really interested in like what makes John Byrne, like what is. And actually, when I talk about the storytelling sequences, like there was an issue of Alpha Flight that he showed me. Same cousin. I owe this guy. I should honestly, I got to call. His name is Paul. Hey, Paul. There was an issue of Alpha Flight where Guardian is like about to explode and like his timer is going off. I think it was like issue 12 or 13. And the panel borders are like numbers, like counting down like 9, 8. And he's like all, and then on the last one, Heather walks in and he's like, no. And he like blows up. And it's this like silent splash page of him just like melting down.
Yeah.
But I had never seen anything like that ever, right? Like, it's like the panels are numbers. What the hell? And like that started me, just thinking about, the different layers of like telling a story, right? Like even the panel borders and their shapes could change the energy of that, you could have a very grid-like structure and it's like, but as soon as you slant a panel and like thin it out on the edge, and all of a sudden it's almost like broken glass, and now it has so much different energy and like more excitement and danger to it. So I that was another way that I started messing around with page layouts. Or even some artists would draw characters outside of a panel just running on top of the other panels, and I'm like, what? I don't want to do that.
And that's unique to comics, isn't it? Because you can't do that in film, you can't do it in animation or prose or whatever. That's a language of comics thing only, which is cool, isn't it?
No, it's amazing. I do miss it a lot. I've been in games for over 20 years now, and I'll still dabble in covers and stuff every once in a while, but it is something I miss. But I need like my life to just slow down a lot to commit to like, forget about a monthly book, but even like a 3 or 4 issue arc or something like that. I would love to do it. I miss it a lot, and I feel like I've gotten better, but I can't like show anyone or prove it. So soon, I think soon I'll take another stab at it.
I think you get a certain amount of fame points anyway, because you remind me a lot of guys like Travis Charest or whatever, who the actual output of comics, if you had to put the pages down on a table, is small. But everybody knows your stuff, and everybody knows your style. So there's something quite cool about that, isn't there? Like, whenever you show up, it's a bit like when Stanley Kubrick had a movie coming out, like a kind of an event, because you're not there every month, which is kind of cool in its own way, isn't it?
Damn, I'll take it. Okay, thank you. No, Travis, he was another one. I was visiting Wildstorm, and he was drawing a cover for everyone was pulling all-nighters for some reason this night, and I was hanging out with Jeff Matsuda at like Kaboom or something. I forgot what his studio was, but we went by Wildstorm, and Travis was there drawing this huge cover. First of all, it was way bigger than 11 by 17, and I remember he started with like an eyeball, and then there was like a head, and then he started drawing some weird machine over here. And then it like connected and I'm just like, there was no layout or underdrawing under it at all. And I'm like, how on earth? Because everything was so precise and like, it blew my mind. And that I didn't realize at the time that there's artists that kind of like can see the image and they're just kind of tracing over it and they project it right onto the paper. And then there's artists that kind of have to chip away at it. Like I'm rough. I do rough layouts. Then I do other ones that are starting to get neater, but they end up becoming more like tighter layouts because they're still too rough. And then I kind of pick the lines that I like, and it takes forever. But yeah, he's just an incredible, amazing talent. So
I was out at the Wildstorm offices years ago, and Scott Dunby, was telling Frank Whiteley and I about him, and he said it was a very similar description. He said it was like watching a printer. Like the art was just coming out like a machine. Yeah, it was incredible, and it was like a human hand had made this. But yeah, I think like there's something to be said for that too, isn't there? That it's kind of special. That it's not that hard to own all of your books because there's not 500 of them or whatever. So it's kind of nice in its own way too, isn't it?
Yeah, lots of covers, but yeah, believe me, I wish I had done more while I was there, but there's still some stuff going on.
Yeah, you still
Yeah, I'll probably end up doing some Battlechasers stuff before too long. So,
but so you must have your plan when you were at Marvel and everything. Must have been games must have been a feature for you in terms of a career at that point. You must have been thinking, "I'll do X-Men, I'll do Batman, all that kind of thing." Did you have a plan that was a little different back then when you were 18, 19?
No, it was comics for me, like only comics. I mean, I would play games for fun, but again, the same way comics were, I didn't really understand the games as a business or like who makes them. Like I was lucky enough to have made it in comics, and as far as I knew, like comics was it forever. Until, you know, I after I had done X-Men and like Battlechasers and stuff, I would visit like studios, you know, whether it's an animation studio or game studios, and they'd be like, oh, you know, we have fans at the studio, can you sign their books or whatever? And I'm like, no, I'm a fan of your guys' stuff. That's crazy. Like one time I went, like I was at Disney, and like the Disney artists were like, had my comics and were like, can you sign this? And I was like the biggest Disney fan on the planet, except maybe for J. Scott. But like I couldn't believe it. And like at one point, you know, some game designers were like, hey, we're breaking off and starting a new thing, and we need like a creative lead and an artist. And I was like, I'm doing it. Again, I had I feel like the less I know about something, the better, because I'll just kind of like figure it out, you know? But at that point, it seemed like crazy. But I was going through a whole bunch of stuff, you know, on Battlechasers. It was like, I think I just like got really burned out, like in comics. I had a lot of like personal stuff going on at the time as well. And I just needed like a break. And like if games paid off, cool. If not, you know, I'll keep doing comics or whatever, but it felt like I had to take a chance. I wish I didn't leave Battlechasers hanging on a cliffhanger, but, you know, I released 3 new issues last year or the year before with Ludo Lullabi as the artist. And I think as long as I'm not drawing them, I could probably sustainably do like more arcs in the future and collect them into trades and stuff.
Because I did wonder at the time, you know, you'd gone from being a huge artist at Marvel, then you go to Cliffhanger Comics, you know, to do Battlechasers, and it's this enormous hit. I remember Battlechasers was doing, like, if I remember correctly, X-Men kind of numbers, wasn't it? I mean, it was in the top 3 every month, really, wasn't it, when it came out? And I remember thinking, why is this guy stopping, you know? And I didn't know you at the time, you know, so like, I remember being kind of confused, like, why would you stop there? It's like Seinfeld ending his show when it's the number 1 show in television. And I think to end it on a cliffhanger, I thought it was called, because the company was called Cliffhanger, and I thought it was a kind of a performance thing or something. You know?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
But you strike me as a guy, like a lot of the really good artists are like this, where you do worry about the pages and you think about it a lot and you worry about the reception to the pages and things. And there's something about games that takes away that pressure, a bit like working in movie design and everything, where nobody overtly criticizes what you've drawn that day. But in comics, the upside is that you get an amazing fan base, but the downside is every single line you draw gets critiqued, you know, which it comes with its own pressures too, doesn't it?
It does. And you know, it's funny because there are artists that have styles that are, you know, a little more about energy and less about precise, you know, like Walter Simonson, right? Like his Thor is unbeatable. Like I was obsessed with his style, but it looks so effortless, and maybe his pages took forever. I don't know, but it looks like it's not really about each line like being perfect, because it's so organic and like there's so much movement and everything, and it's really like the energy. It's unmistakable, right? But like I had to pick a style that was like so annoyingly detailed and you know, guys like J. Scott, anyone following the Art Adams, like Jim Lee, like school, was like doomed to like take forever on pages. But it didn't matter. Like, you know, I loved it. I just wanted it to be perfect. And of course it's not, right? Looking back now, I'm like, wow. You know, it didn't really matter that I took that time because they aren't that great. I am still pretty happy with a lot of the Battle-Chaser stuff, though. Like,
it's great, yeah.
I have a lot of the originals still. I can't bring myself to sell them because I'm like, I don't know. I can still feel it. Like when I hold the pages, I'm like, there was something here.
Listen, if you don't sell it now, your grandchildren are going to sell it in the future and have a lot of money. You know, you might as well enjoy it. You know?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. My grandkids can have it.
Because Frank Whiteley, I remember we're really good friends, but like before I met him, I knew he took a long time to draw a page. And it was the same with Travis as well. And I assumed they spent loads of time playing video games and watching TV and everything, but they were sitting at the drawing board for 12 hours a day, even though it was taking a long time. And you strike me as a bit like that as well, where you're actually just rubbing out and rethinking and everything, you know?
It's funny that I honestly have gotten slower somehow. And I don't know if it's just because I'm drawing less or I care more, but I feel like the more I learned, you know, like the more mistakes I see, it's like, oh, yeah, now I know about anatomy and I can see I was doing this all wrong. But now it's like painstaking to get it right. And so I think my eye has become more trained to where I just see more flaws in my own stuff. And I am still nitpicky. Believe me, I'm working even right now on the game stuff. It's true that nobody's actually going to see my contributions because it gets filtered through the whole team and ends up in a game. But I still painstakingly am making every single drawing like as perfect as I can for myself. It's too much, but every once in a while, you know, it's like if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then, you know, I just won't do it. You can pay me enough to do something that I just don't want to do. So
why do you think Battlechasers did hit so big? Because it was really unlike anything else out at the time. You know, like you kind of forget now because comics is quite a diverse thing in terms of genre. You know, you'll get comics about anything now. Like a book like Saga would have been unthinkable 25 years ago, you know. But Battlechasers was in a genre that wasn't popular at the time, you know, like superhero comics was kind of all there was. There was superhero, and then Vertigo did pretty much just horror, you know, for the most part. So your book really felt different, and yet it found this immediate, gigantic audience. Do you think you tapped into something, or do you think people just were loving what you'd been doing before and they followed you for whatever you were doing next?
I think it was both. I mean, I definitely had built the fan base on X-Men, right? Like it was the #1 book in the industry. So I knew for sure some people were going to be intrigued about what I was doing next, especially with the, you know, cliffhanger imprint and stuff. There was a lot of like heat on what we were all doing because we were all coming around the same time. That was Jim's idea. Jim Lee was like, you guys all have books at the same time. It's a no-brainer. Just put it all under one umbrella. But I think part of it was that I still treated it like a superhero comic. Like it felt like, even when I pitched the book to Jim, I didn't have art or anything. And he's like, why are you leaving X-Men to do fantasy? And he was like Conan shit. And I'm like, no, it's not like Conan. It's like Final Fantasy 6 and 7 and like these RPGs I was playing and you know, Berserk, like manga, like Record of Lotus War. And it was like, it's not Conan. You know, there's this hot chick with guns, there's a swordsman, there's an old guy and a little girl with a robot. And he was just like, whatever, man, I trust you. And but I had just coming off X-Men and my whole life, like reading superhero comics, I couldn't help but make it feel like a superhero comic. I didn't want it to be really like, you know, Tolkien-esque, just straight fantasy. I wanted it to be edgy and like, you know, basically feel like an X-Men comic that's in a fantasy world. And I think that's probably why people were like, oh shit, like, this doesn't feel like Conan. There really isn't something like this in the States, you know. I mean, manga, there was tons of fantasy manga, but it hadn't really hit here yet. And I was just so burned out on superheroes. Like at that time, we were talking about what was next after X-Men, and it was like possibly a new Spidey title, which there were so many already at that time. And then one time, I was on an elevator with a bunch of editors, and they were like, "What if you could do any book? What would you want to do?" And I was like, "I kind of want to do Secret Wars, like bring it back, because it has like every fucking character ever in it, and I would love to just take a stab at all of them." And they laughed. They laughed me out of the elevator because they thought it was a terrible idea. However, they did bring it back multiple times. So I was onto something. Although in hindsight, thank God I didn't. Drawing like 50 different characters in a book is probably not something.
You'd still be drawing that right now.
I know, I would still be doing it. So yeah, fantasy was it. It was, like I said, I grew up on The Hobbit, and I became quite a reader of fantasy, and then just animation, and I was like, I gotta do a fantasy comic.
Because I think there's two types of creators. There's the guys who hang around too long, on a particular title to the point where, the massive heat that you have in the book sort of drifts off. And then there's the guy who's crazy, who tends to be the more interesting creator, who when they're at the peak on something, they jump, they get off the stage while everybody's clapping. And I think you did that for sure with X-Men, like to leave X-Men when it was the #1 book. But it's quite a bold thing. Did anyone try and talk you out of it? I don't know if you were married at the time or anything, or, our editors try and talk you out of it? Because it's quite a thing to leave the #1 thing for something that's an unknown quantity, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much everyone unanimously thought it was a bad idea. I think. But I honestly don't remember. I was already talking to some of the Image guys about, doing books for them. Yeah. And, because all of their stuff was creator owned, I thought if I'm going to leave X-Men, I don't want to work on, Wildcat spinoff or, I was talking to Rob at the time about a book I remember, and I thought I kind of just would rather do my thing. And if it's ever going to succeed, it would probably be now, right? Because I'm coming off X-Men and, if anyone's going to give this fantasy book a shot. And I just kind of took the chance. But yeah, editors at Marvel were like, no, we'll give you another. Who do you love? Spider-Man? Let's make a new Spidey title. It'll be cool. And I did consider it for a little while because I was nervous, but I don't know why I've never had that fear of failure. Mm-hmm. If I want it bad enough, I just dive into it and I figure it out. Same with games, same with whatever. I didn't really, I was very lucky, right? Because I knew if it did fail, guess what? I'll come crawling back to Marvel or Image and be like, hey, what do you got? Can I do another Deadpool run? Whatever.
Did you leave on good terms though with Marvel? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
That's the trick. It's always good to have that in your back pocket because you'd have been young. You'd have been, 24 or something when you went off to do Battlechasers, maybe even younger?
Yeah, that sounds about right. 24, I think.
To end your Marvel career at 24 and go off and start your own thing is quite bold, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I was 38 before I did that when I left Marvel.
But you got to remember, I started so young. My life was strange because I was 16, 17. I would go to school and then go to Marvel, and I would have. When I was a junior, I did 2 issues of Excalibur, right? Mm-hmm. And I would be working on them in the evenings, and sometimes I didn't have time to go to sleep. I would draw right up until 6 a.m. and then get dressed for school and get on the train, and I would fall asleep on the subway. And everyone I dealt with were adults, right? I didn't hang out. I didn't go to clubs. I didn't drink or have parties with my friends. I just hung around these 30, 40, 50-year-old people at Marvel, editors, artists, whatever. So I was already had a professional mindset. I didn't want to disappoint people. And I was just working all the time. Back then it was wild. I would just fall asleep on the desk. Cause I would be like, why is Tex over here? Mark Texera just crashed out on the desk every morning. But it's oh, I get it now. Cause you have a deadline and you're going to hit it no matter what. I would my wife at the time would I would be the FedEx office closes at 7. It's 6:40. Get in the car. I got to just drive. I'm still working on panels. The car's all bumpy. I'm drawing. And I would always run into Al Milgram there because Al Milgram, we went to the same FedEx and we would close the place down. And often they would lock it up 2 minutes early because they knew we were coming. And I'd be banging on the window, and it's like, you're not closed yet, because they're like, man, those guys, they're always here. But it was crazy. I've never worked as hard since as I did those first few years, where I was just like, trying to prove myself and just, probably biting off more than I could chew, but I just didn't care.
Can you imagine pulling an all-nighter now, at 50?
No.
It's literally.
I gotta go to bed at like 10 p.m.
If I'm not drunk, I'm asleep by 10 as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The only guy who can do it is John Romita Jr. I mean, Johnny's got this incredible level of fitness. Anyway, that even though he's 68 or something, he's got this insane level of fitness. He's in the gym for 2 hours every morning. But Johnny has sometimes done all-nighters at weekends. Like he'll start drawing on a Friday and finish 22 pages on a Monday. It's insane. Yeah.
No, he is one of those guys. Another, like, maybe not obvious influence on my work, but his, like, Daredevil, X-Men, they're like some of my favorites. And I met him a few times. I don't know if he remembers, but, just when I would be in the Raiders room, or he'd come, hang with his dad. And he was like the nicest guy. And I remember him always being like swole. Like even back then he was like, a gym guy, and like, just like so easygoing. And like, I'm like, this guy has like goals. Like he's, I don't know why I always expected that, when I meet my heroes, they're going to be big douchebags. But so far it's like the more awesome, honestly, the best and most amazing artists that I looked up to are the nicest, most humble guys. It's so weird.
But I think comics has generally nice people as well. It's very few people who aren't, but I mean, like any business. But like I would say, almost everyone you meet, you've got tons in common with them. Yeah, you've got a lot of shared experience with.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
who were you hanging out with at that time then when you were doing Battlechasers? Were you and Jay Scott actually nearby each other or anything? Did you kind of live in the same city or?
No, I lived in New York, so I didn't have anyone near me at all except Al Milgram. And, we would talk on the phone, though. Jim Lee, I'm going to out him, or maybe he's already talked about it, but we would play online games like Ultima Online, EverQuest. We had guilds and stuff. We'd do raids, and we would play till, we would pull all-nighters on that stuff. And so like that was my way of hanging out with these guys. Back then it's so weird to think about, because I hate when people call me now. Just send me a text. I don't want to be on the phone. But we would, put our phone on speakerphone and just be drawing and talk for hours. Mike Turner was another good buddy of mine, but we only hung out like remotely, like over the phone for hours and hours. But that was it. I had no one like in New York that I hung out with unless I went into, the Marvel office and there happened to be people there.
There was actually an amazing bunch of superstar artists around about that time, because we don't quite have it just now. There wasn't that next wave of people coming in. There's some excellent artists have appeared, but those guys who are like rock stars, there was a whole bunch in the 90s, wasn't there? Starting with those Image guys who'd come out of the 80s boom, with John Byrne and Frank Miller and everyone, and Walt Simonson. But there was so many people with their own studios, like you say, like Mike Turner and Mark Silvestri, all these guys, Rob, there was the Image guys influenced an amazing wave of guys for about 10 years, didn't they? And you were one of those guys too, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was almost like artists at that time had this like rock star status, and everyone wanted to be them. Like art sold the books, and period. Like nobody actually read the stories for the most part, unless it's like Frank Miller or some amazing piece of actual literature. But I think now that comics sell what they do, and there's like a whole lot of stuff that's changed in the industry. But I think and people do read books for the stories nowadays. I think like I've only picked up books that I want to like see what the story is about or whatever. There aren't that many. Yeah, you're right. There aren't like George Jimenez is amazing. I consider him a rock star. Lionel Yu.
Dan Mora is great. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Simone DeMeo, this guy.
Amazing, yeah. So underrated, that guy. He's brilliant.
He's crazy. I'm like, this guy is almost too good for comics. Like, what on earth? They better be paying him a fortune. Because he does the thing where it's like very 90s. Every panel is like a cinematic masterpiece with crazy camera angles, perspective he didn't really have to do.
Yeah.
What are you doing? He just, it's magic though, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it like makes me feel that buzz, and like, so there are still people doing it, but it's not like, you know, the thing. Now there's so much stuff with art that you can be doing out there.
But it's interesting because you were one of the first guys to do this, which was, you know, being in comics for a while, but then drifting off into video games. And I think a lot of great artists that probably would have come into comics, it became more writer-driven, I think, after the year 2000. But a lot of great artists went off and did other things. And I wonder why that happened, because the lifestyle is pretty amazing, especially at that time in comics, like 2000 to 2010, when a lot of artists went off into games. The writers went off into Hollywood maybe a little bit later. But the lifestyle in comics was good, you know? So, I mean, what was it that drew people into games, do you think?
I mean, speaking for myself, I just, you know, I have the curse that I have to work on stuff I'm excited about. And I just was so fascinated by, you know, the just design of games, and like obviously playing games was something that I had been doing for years. And I think, you know, it was a mixture of just starting to get burned out, or having been burned out for a long time, sadly, and seeing this new opportunity. It just, I don't know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me. So I just do what I like, you know, and it's like 100 people could caution me against it, but if I'm feeling it, I'm probably going to do it. And again, like, I was blessed in that if it didn't work out, guess what? I can still do comics, and you know, I don't know why, because I know a lot of guys we're doing like storyboards for film and stuff like that, and I was always, you know, curious about it myself, but I definitely was just following my own compass. I wasn't like, where am I going next? But, you know, I'm sure that you know, having worked in film and comics, like you're still, like, I could probably retire, but like I can't, because I still want to like do animation projects, and like I still want to do, even outside of games and comics. I've had my eye on like animation for a while, and film, and like I just, part of me is like, I'm too old now, I missed the boat, and then I'm like, no, I'm not. You know, it's like we'll
probably live to about 3,000 thanks to AI. You know, we're like that first generation of humans that's going to live forever. You know, so
there is that as well.
But it's funny because you know, I was the same. We sold our company 8 years ago now, and I took a week off and then just went back to work the next week, because you know, which is insane. I mean, we never need to work again, you know, but I took 7 days off, and I couldn't wait to get back to work that Monday morning. You know, like I just love doing it. You know?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, you just got to do what you love, and it may not make sense to everybody, but you know, I'm the same way. Like, I actually struggle being on vacation. After a week, I'm like, start to get antsy. Like, I don't know how to like stop, and I start missing work. I'm like, I want to get back to it.
Well, the thing is, somebody said to me, like, what we do is kind of like a vacation anyway. This is what we would do in our spare time. So a vacation is us not doing what we really want to be doing. If you think about it, it's quite an odd thing, isn't it? So I'm just about to get away tomorrow for 12 days. And I'm like, oh man, why is it 12 days we're going out? I wish it had just been 7, you know?
Yeah. No, and, you know, I think when I was a kid, you know, my dad would work all the time. He was in construction, and he was just kind of a workaholic to, you know, and I think it like kind of, it's something that I picked up unknowingly, but I'd always wonder, like, even when we'd go like on vacation somewhere, he'd be like wandering off and like doing his own thing. And I'm like, oh no, am I turning into my dad? Probably.
It's inevitable. We all do, So.
I definitely got the whole, just figure it out. Like, because he moved here, he couldn't speak English at all. He had no money. He was like, a day laborer getting picked up for construction projects on the street corner, and some days not work at all. And like, he did that for a few years, and then he's like, wait a minute, if I get my own van, I could hire these guys, and then we could keep all the money from these jobs. And he just figured it out. Like, he didn't really speak the language, and like, I honestly don't really know how he pulled it off, but he's became, very successful with his construction business, and he made an amazing life for himself and us, but he really just did it. You know what I mean? And I think maybe that's where I got the whole thing where I'm like, I didn't go to school. I didn't study this stuff like formally, sometimes I wish I had, but again, maybe knowing too much would turn me off of it. I would just rather figure it out while I'm getting my hands dirty.
It's interesting though, but that's where you must get your risk taking from. If you think about it, your dad left a country like Portugal to come to America where he didn't speak the language. And then once he's here for a little while, he gambles everything and starts his own thing. And you've done the 21st century version of that, isn't it? Which is leaving Marvel when everything's cool, and then leaving Battlechasers when it's number one and going off and get into something entirely risky and new, So I guess it's the upgrade on that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I could say that there was logic to my choices or like some kind of a plan that I was following, but you just know when you're ready to move on, and it could be, luckily for me, the books were still on top.
Yeah.
And I always do still try to outdo the last thing. That was another Rob Liefeld wisdom. It was like, just pick your projects, like pretend you're like an actor in a movie. You just did this huge movie. What's your next movie? You're not going to go do like a, you just got to like keep building on top of what you have and like pick something bigger.
Yeah.
And, I think, again, for me though, at that time, there was not really anything bigger than X-Men other than doing my own thing. And so it's like, fantasy Battlechasers. It's just, I had to. And I mean, ironically, that was our first game at Airship, the studio I started about 11 years ago, was a Kickstarter Battlechasers game. And we did it. We had 4 people at the time and a lot of favors.
Yeah.
And we had about 8 people when we shipped, but we're working on our 5th game right now at the studio. And, that Battlechasers came back like full circle. It was weird because the book it was like 25 years old or whatever, but people were still, into it. So it gave me a lot of confidence to bring it back.
So what is your actual day-to-day involved in this job, in the video game side of things? Because, you've ridden both horses, but I don't really know much about that world, So what's a typical day for you?
Oh, a lot of, lately a lot of meetings. So I'm the CEO and also the creative director. So I oversee anything on the, story side, art side, characters. I usually will chime in on like gameplay stuff or whatever, but I basically have like a hand in everything, but the main focus is like art and story and the IP development side of stuff. But I'll do some sketches, write a bunch of documents. A lot of it is like we work in Slack, so we'll be posting updates and stuff all day. So half my day is just answering people in Slack and doing little paint overs where it's like, how's this look? And I'll be like, no, make the arms bigger and get this thing off do a different helmet and provide reference and stuff like that. So it's a lot. I don't get to draw, but I do have fun stuff. Like right now I'm working on, sometimes if we do pitches, like I'll generate like some, nice art for that, or I'll do key art for the games that we do. And those I will take my sweet time on, and it kind of feels like the old days, but I don't really get to do a ton of like tight drawings anymore. There is a game that we're working on right now that I might actually do a lot of the in-game art for. I'm starting on that now. And so that's cool. But like I said, I've gotten so slow, man. Like I'm like, one character can take me days. And I'm like, I used to do one page with like 50 characters on it in a day. And now I can't. What's happening? I'm just
Joe
slow.
Kubert said that to me. Joe Kubert, when he started working in the 40s, he was drawing comics in the 40s, and he was drawing 6 pages a day in the 40s.
No.
And the reason he said that people slow down is they said you were getting no money back then. You were getting a few dollars per page. So to make a living, you had to do 6 pages a day. And he said sometimes like getting the extra cash makes you relax a little bit too much, and you don't actually do have the same output. And I think that's probably true for most people, isn't it? As long as you can pay your bills and, you're not going to sit there going crazy,
No,
So
it's true.
It's quite nice at this point in your life. It's a nice position to be in. That everything you do, you're really happy with, and you can take your time on it, which is great.
Yeah, I kind of hate that it's like coming back to that where when I started at Marvel, my page rate was $70 a page, 70, and 11 by 17. Didn't matter if it was 10 panels or a double page spread. $70 is what I got. And so, yeah, I tried to do them. And, our deadlines were like a page a day was like the target. Yeah. And so I remember when I got a raise to 90 a page, I was like, oh shit, I'm rich. And then the first royalty check I ever got, because I had never worked on anything that had royalties, right? I did some Excalibur issues, Marvel Comics Presents, nothing. And then I did Deadpool, kind of forgot about it, happy with my 90 a page. And then I got this check, and like I looked at it, and it was like for, $2,500, I thought. And I'm like, oh my God, holy shit. I had never seen a check that big in my life, right? Because a couple hundred was like a lot. And I was like, $2,500. And then I was like looking at it, and there was extra zeros. And I'm like,
oh my God,
wait a minute. This is $25,000. Like I was like 19 years old.
Yeah.
And it was for something I had done, like months ago or whatever, a year ago. I don't know. And that's when I was like, oh, fuck, that money that you're talking about, the 90s money, because that was only one of, several checks that would come, right, from the first issue. And people were signing, like, paying me for signatures and stuff like, hey, can you sign 15,000 copies of Deadpool #1? I'm like, sure. It was like wild, right? But now it's going back to that page rate. Like there's like these amazing artists that I'm like, that's all they're paying you? Like, excuse me? Like, because these, and as God forbid if you're a colorist or whatever, you better be banging out like 5 pages a day or whatever, because I paid my colorists on Battlechasers 25 years ago multiple times what people get paid today in some cases, which makes me sad because, life is way more expensive now, but they're still kind of paying, similar rates to 10 or 20 years ago in some cases, not everyone.
At Millar World, we give the artists whatever they want up front. And then, prior to selling to Netflix, when it was our company, we went 50-50 with all the artists on everything, because we were co-creating them as comics before they were becoming anything else. So all those guys get crazy paydays, like
that's amazing. Yeah.
Way beyond anything comics has ever seen before, and that was the deal that we always said. We said, whatever I get, you get exactly the same. We go 50-50 on everything. So the movie deals, the Pez dispensers, anything like there was Kick-Ass pajamas and things like that, it's anything is 50-50. So because I always see it as so disgraceful, the idea that companies make billions and artists make thousands. It always sickens me,
Yeah, it's true. But I think, despite that, people are going to do it because they love it. And that's when you get like the purest, most amazing work anyway. So,
so whenever you're at a party then, because you do these two things, what do you tell people you are? Do you say you're a video game guy or a comic book guy? What do you say?
Yeah, I've been in games so long. I guess I introduce myself as a game guy, but they'll always be like, didn't you used to do comics though? And like, that's actually what they want to talk about.
And comics has been sexy for 25 years, really, as well. Like, people get quite excited when they hear you've worked at Marvel or whatever, don't they? Yeah.
Oh, totally. I'll still like to this. I did a poll like a couple of years ago. Like, hey, do you know my work from games or comics? And it was like almost 80% comics, and like even to this day, my occasionally I'll get someone that's like, oh, my nephew is playing your video game, but usually it's like, hey, can you sign a bunch of comics for my friend? They freaked out that I work with you or whatever. So comics are still in my blood. And so I guess I am like the comic / video game guy. But, I still would love to, like I said, I'd still love to do some pages, and I just have to find the time for it, because it is a passion project at this point. I'm not going to like make $1 bazillion off a comic. I'm going to do it because I have to finish this Battlechasers story or whatever it is, and because I have these scenes like in my head that if I don't put them on paper, it's going to drive me crazy.
That's one of my last questions for you, actually, is I know that you had the big gap. We get Battlechasers, decades ago, you do issue 9, and then suddenly you're doing 10, 11, and 12. So like, what had you learned in that period? Because you're a different guy, 20, 25 years on like that. Like you've honed your skills, so how did you feel coming back to it?
I was worried, I mean, mainly it was I was worried about the reception because I was not drawing the books, and I'm not really like a writer by trade, but I had hoped that people would still care about where this story is going. And, Ludo did an amazing job. There are times where, I still want to draw it myself. I would love to, believe me, but the amount of time, like it doesn't make sense. It's going to have to be, when I just have like a year of like no other responsibilities to like buck down and do a few issues.
Did you enjoy it though? Yeah. Did you enjoy doing it?
I loved it. It was cool. And like the books were like really well reviewed. And I was like, cool, people do care about the story, because I have gotten more into just storytelling in general, writing, art. I feel like my art has gotten better, even though, I only did the covers for those issues. So I definitely, it gave me the confidence to like keep continuing it. And hopefully, maybe I can do like 10 pages here and there, or like little shorts, or, and like start contributing more to the actual stories in the books. But I definitely want to keep it going.
Where did you find Ludo? I mean, Ludo's name he sounds like a stripper, doesn't he? Like Ludo Lullabi. It's like the greatest name I've ever heard. So where did you find him?
He's, I've been a fan of his for ages. He actually, so in one of the early game projects I did called Darksiders, we had a little graphic novel. And how did I stumble onto his work? He had done some like art for the World of Warcraft comic or something for Blizzard, and I didn't know that he was like a comic artist himself, like in France. And he, I was just like, this guy's work is phenomenal. And the more I dug into it, I was like, wow. And we remained friends for years after that. And he worked on a lot of our video game projects, actually, because he worked on the Battlechasers game. He did a lot of the cinematics that play. And the reason I loved his art is because I didn't want someone that tried to draw like me, but has the same energy. Like his stuff has the same crunchy, hyperkinetic energy, slight anime influence, like, huge shapes and like cool action, but he doesn't like try to copy my style, but it somehow fits.
Yeah.
So he was like, as we were working on the game stuff, I was like, man, if I ever do the comic again, I need this guy to draw it, because he gets it. Like, I love his take on every character. And so it was just a matter of time. We always knew we were gonna do it, and he wants to do more. So do I. So hopefully we'll get that going soon.
Amazing. And one very last question. Like, I think you're one of those guys that all the young artists in particular have always loved, What's your advice to young guys breaking into the industry? Because you've done a lot of things that artists want to do. You've created your own books, you've worked for Marvel, you've done video games, done concept art and everything, like if somebody says to you, how can I become the next Joe Mad, what do you say?
In comics or games?
Either.
Either.
If you're sitting in your bedroom just drawing, you know, and you're this life seems exciting to you?
Yeah, I would say, like, number one, just put your stuff out there, right? You have access to all these online, outlets that you can put your work in front of people and, learn, and like take criticism and take advice. Like, I do think a lot of people ask for advice, and then when it's given, they're kind of like defensive, or I can tell that it's not. You can tell when it's well received and when it's not. And like, I get it. Like, I think early on when someone would give me some harsh criticism, it was heartbreaking, but guess what? That's the stuff that's stuck in my head. Like, I never did it again. Like, someone drew like a line down the middle of one of my faces on my original art, and they're like, look at her eyes are not centered. The nose is not centered. And like, after that, I was so cautious about that center line. You know what I mean? It was like, I just needed to hear it. So like, listen to people's advice. You don't know everything. And you will get better, but you have to keep doing it. Intern somewhere, learn from professionals, you can only do it in your room for so long. It's just drawing by yourself. I think show your stuff to people, meet professionals, go to where they are. Comics are easy. Go to Comic-Con, go wherever. Shake hands with Art Adams, ask him questions. Like, they're, nice people, like we said, that are usually pretty helpful. And yeah, just, I think the other thing is like resilience, right? It's like you might not make it right away, but it doesn't. My first game company tanked in 10 months, didn't go anywhere. It's a complete waste of money. But I stayed friends with a lot of those guys, and they got hired somewhere that ended up bringing me on. So like, making those connections, whether it's online or, in person, just, learn from professionals and start doing it in a professional setting as early as you can, even if it's not a ton of money. Sometimes learning and making relationships is more important at first. So pretty obvious stuff, but it's stuff I think about. I have daughters now, they're grown, and like they're struggle a little with, resilience at times where it's like, this is too hard. I don't want to do it. It's like, yeah, but, hopefully they see that it can pay off eventually. And it is an issue with like a lot of younger artists coming out of school now. They do often ask, how do I do what you do? And it's like, you kind of, it's a weird answer where you kind of just have to like do it. You have to just already be doing it, show people that you're doing it, listen to their advice because they're telling you for a reason. I'm not over here trying to ruin your day that, hey, you can't draw hands, learn how to do this. And the other thing too, for comics specifically, or for both actually, is like, make sure your portfolio has stuff in it that shows the type of work you're trying to land, right? Like, if I'm going to apply at Blizzard, I'll look at Diablo, Warcraft, I get what their styles look like, and my portfolio will probably have a lot of like fantasy stuff in it. And comics, like, don't just have pinups of, awesome single characters. Like where are the storytelling? That's the thing I see the most from people wanting to draw comics. Like, they don't really have like pages of nice storytelling. It's usually like just really cool looking characters. And it's like, okay, but you're going to have to show a shot from inside a car and, switch cameras. And, there's a car driving up next to them, shooting out the windows. And like the car flips upside down on the next page. Like, planning those shots, choosing those shots, like it's more than just drawing a cool muscle guy. So I think
it worked for the image guys. Those first few years that worked pretty damn good.
Yeah, I snuck in there just in time, but guess what? It doesn't fly anymore. You gotta be able to tell a powerful visual story. So like, I'd rather see that, honestly, because I know that you can draw a badass looking character on a cover, from looking at the pages. But if I don't see like storytelling, like I know like this person is not really serious about it. Or yeah, you should have been born in the 90s or working in the 90s. But
Listen,
I'm not a great teacher. I'm not like one of those guys that's like I kind of like react and go with my gut. I'm like more instinctual. I'm not like, here's a set of rules that I follow. I wish that I did sometimes, but I don't have like a lot of structure, or at least maybe I'm not aware that I do, but I'm bad at communicating it to people.
That's nice. It's nice. I think people always like it if they see someone doing something they want to do. You know, like if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, there's a very established path. But comics and video games and everything, it's like, kids are like, where do I even begin? So it's nice to talk to people or hear from people who've done it. I get invited into my middle kids' school, high school, about 3 weeks ago, and it was disastrous. You know, because they were kind of like, so what do you do? And I was like, well, spend the first 14 years of your life just reading in your room, you know, so, and then drop out of university, you know. So it's like everything I was saying was like terrible advice, but that is the path to being a creative sometimes, isn't it? You know, as you take a very unexpected route.
And absolutely, and it has to be like when you want it, and you know, it depends how badly you want it. But you know, for me, that's really the only thing that's guided me. Like I said, I wish I had I couldn't even tell you what I'm doing in 5 years. I hate that question, you know, when you like interview question where it's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh God, I've never been able to answer that question in my entire life. And I
know what I'm doing in 9 years. In 9 years, Superman goes public domain. So I'm going to start working on Superman in 9 years' time and Batman in 10 years. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I would love to.
I can't wait. I've got my artists already lined up. I'm trying to keep them alive for the next 10 years because they're like 50 now, you know, so like I have to just make sure they're still with us in 10 years time.
Yeah, the OGs. Well, I hope that we're all still around for it.
Well, listen, I'm going to go. We're actually off to see the Minecraft movie now, you know, so like my youngest kid is desperate to see it, and there's a little 5-minute preview of Superman, so I've got that, and then I can have a sleep, you know.
Very cool. No, enjoy it. I've heard it's a fun time actually, so I might check it out myself.
Cool. Listen, great talking to you, Joe, and all the best.
It was very good talking to you as well. Finally, it's like been so long. I've been a fan of your work, and I don't really do podcasts and stuff. I'm like too nervous. I hate being on camera, but I was like, you know, I got to talk to Mark and.
Well, I want to get like the 50 best guys. You know, I love the idea of this being a little time capsule because as everybody's getting older and moving on to other industries and everything, it's nice this little snapshot in time and getting all the guys whose work I love. So I want 50 of these at least sitting here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for bringing me on. I appreciate it. It was great talking
Good to see you. All the best then. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.